Welcome back to Aspire to Lead. This week, I'm very excited for a wonderful guest, but before we jump in, I just want to let you know I'm actually going to be jumping on a plane, heading over to Charlotte, North Carolina for the NCMLE conference in North Carolina, moving the middle forward for 3 days as I'm going to be presenting twice. The first presentation is with my wonderful co-author, Charlie Peck. Of course, we're going to be talking about strategies from our book, The Language of Behavior. The second presentation is going to be something that's very popular and something I've been doing with a lot of conferences and school districts, which is enhancing your capacity with healthy habits, as we're going to be talking through a lot of different things that we're frustrated with right now as far as burnout, anxiety, avoidance, and how to use some really simple strategies to get you through, especially the spring right now. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about also with our wonderful guest this week, as I have Katrina Huels today, and she's an educational consultant and former special education and leader with more than 20 years of experience working across classrooms, programs, and district leadership. And we're going to be focusing on emotional intelligence, or some people call it EQ. We're going to be talking about stress management. We're going to geek out on the brain. And of course, we're going to talk about burnout as far as the psychology, the neuroscience, and how educational leadership can really put a lot on our nervous system. And she's brilliant about talking about emotional intelligence development, neuroplasticity, and cultivating professional resilience. So stick with us as we're having an awesome conversation, not only about the work that she's doing, some strategies, but then also about her awesome book, Transformational Tools for Special Educators. And we talk about how this book is not just for special educators, but also everyone in education. Welcome to Aspire to Lead, where we empower educators and school leaders to grow, inspire, and thrive. I'm your host, Joshua Stamper, author, speaker, and leadership coach, bringing you conversations that spark transformation, challenge the status quo in education, and equip you to make a lasting impact on your campus or in your district. For more information and resources, visit joshstamper.com as we're looking to ascend to new leadership heights together. All right, Aspire Leaders, welcome back. I am so excited for my guest. I've got Katrina Huels here, and she is amazing. I cannot wait to hear about her journey, but then also some strategies around burnout, which I know a lot of educators are feeling right now, as we've had some conversations both on campuses, coaching, at conferences, and it feels like this is the perfect time of year for folks to hear this message. So with that, Katrina, thank you so much for being on Aspire to Lead.
Thank you, Josh. I'm so excited to be here.
All right, before we dive into this topic, and one that's much needed, let's go ahead and talk about your journey. So will you share a little bit about your educational leadership journey?
I absolutely will. So I guess I got into educational leadership about halfway through my career. Spent about 14 years moving through different roles, from leadership into supervisory experiences, assistant director, executive director. And really, to me, and I assume for you as well, leadership is mostly about supporting your people, right? Making sure they have what they need to grow, to excel, to thrive. And what I found out was I noticed several trends along the way, and I'm sure you've noticed them too. The first one was attrition. It continues to grow. The second one really was teacher retention. We weren't able to keep some of our best teachers, that they just kept going and not coming back, leaving vacancies that often remained unfulfilled. So that was a huge one. And then I also noticed that people were absent a lot, and I think that's probably still the case because it's a tough job, and you have a lot of absenteeism, and that puts the load on all of the other staff members who are present. So I started asking questions about that. And because I was really involved with special education, I think I incorrectly jumped to the conclusion, well, our kids are really tough, and these are challenging and unique kiddos, and, it takes a lot out of you. But the more questions I asked, the more I realized it was not the kiddos at all. And that was shocking to me. What it was is people were chronically fatigued all the time, overwhelmed, basically just stressed out. And some were leaving the field entirely because of that. So as I started investigating, well, what are we doing about that? And I don't want to say we weren't doing anything, because there's a lot of knowledge now on compassion fatigue and burnout. It's out there, but the truth is, I think the latest polls were 54% of K through 12 educators report feeling burnout, often or always. That's just really high. And it really does directly contribute to many, many staff members losing their passion for the work that they do or leaving the field. So that got me really interested in ways that we can address that individually and also at district levels.
Yeah. Let's dive into that more because you're right. I've seen this both with the surveys and the data showing that educators are naming these emotions, like you said, frustration, anxiety, feeling overwhelmed. So, what do you think is behind that? What are the drivers that are going on at the campus level for our educators to feel that way?
I mean, as I went through the research for the book, I realized there's a lot of different elements to this. But I think, sometimes people say they need administrative support. We all know that. They feel like the culture could be improved. They're wearing many hats. There's a lot of different data that comes up when you're looking into the research. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest deficit is that our teachers don't have the skills they need to actually manage stress and to create resilience. And that's kind of what led me to the work I'm doing now. I do know there are amazing programs out there who have been incorporating emotional intelligence development into schools and different systems. And what they're finding is that when you give staff members, and I'm not just talking about teachers, I should say that, I started out looking at special education, but what I learned was that burnout is not just special education. This is across the board, leaders, teachers, anyone in education. So what's happening is when these skills and tools are brought into that setting, not SEL for kids, but really emotional intelligence development for adults, they're seeing job satisfaction increase. They're seeing productive collaboration, less turnover, much, much less turnover. They're seeing improvements in classrooms. I mean, they're just seeing improvements pretty much across all of the things that basically lead to burnout. So, and burnout decreases significantly. So that's what got me into, the question, why don't we do this? Why aren't we equipping our teachers, our principals, our assistant principal, why isn't everybody learning about how to manage their stress and stay calm and stay centered throughout their day? Because we really can't change everything going on outside of us, right? We can't we can't change district mandates, we can't change state mandates, we can't change those things, but what you can change is how you respond to those things. And that's really what emotional intelligence development is about.
Yeah, can we dive a little bit deeper? This could be EQ is sometimes described as
Yes,
that, or
yes,
emotional
absolutely.
intelligence. And maybe our listeners have heard these terms, but maybe
Hmm,
don't
hmm.
have a definition around that. So when we're talking about emotional intelligence, we just kind of outline what that looks like for our educators and why there is a connection as far as reducing that feeling of burnout with those EQ skills.
Yes, absolutely. So when we look at emotional intelligence, I mean, I personally and many people break them into five different domains. And the first three are really for internal development, right? So it's self-awareness, self-regulation skills, and internal motivation skills. And I know motivation sometimes makes people go, why is motivation there? And that is because with internal motivation, it's what keeps you connected to your purpose. Many people in education, I think the most disappointing thing that I see in education is when an amazing leader or an amazing teacher loses their passion. And that's usually because they have lost connection to their purpose. So that's why motivation is included. So it's self-awareness, self-regulation, internal motivation. And once you master and lay the foundation for those internal skills, then you move into empathy and social skills. So there's five domains there. And here's the thing, when you learn how to stay calm and composed in the midst of, let's just say, chaos, because it often can feel like chaos, you're intentionally then choosing how to respond. You're shutting down that whole stress response, that fight or flight, and you're actually moving into problem solving mode. And that's the way most of us would like to respond. But if we don't have the tools and we can't learn how to bring those tools in to make that happen, many times you just become reactive, right? And you're just trying to really act without thinking it through. And that happens to anyone, but especially in education, because I mean, let's face it, you usually have about 20 things to do at once, and you're trying to navigate through the day. You're putting out fires, especially in leadership. I mean, that's what I found. Most of most of my day was trying to help people by putting out fires, giving them what they needed. So if you don't have those skills, that's when overwhelm, frustration, that's when it can kind of lead to burnout because you're constantly in a state of stress. When you're using these tools, however, you're not in that constant state of stress. You remain balanced, you remain centered. You remain connected to your purpose, all things that shift your mind and therefore your nervous system. And that's really what you're trying to do, is to control your nervous system and your mind so that you can really thrive and excel in this work, which is so very important.
Yeah. So if a leader is listening right now and they're like, yes, I feel like we have a system of reactions and, EQ is something that we haven't really touched on, but obviously it looks like it's helping problem solve. So what are some
Mm.
things that they can embed for their professional learning that would be for like a first year realistic rollout of
Right,
of
right, right.
practices?
I provide training for that, of course, but
Of
there are a lot
course.
of people that will provide training on the basics of this kind of development. So many people, I go across the 5 domains, but many people will focus just on self-regulation. I mean, if you just take one domain at a time, sometimes that makes it easier. But what I find is that once you kind of start to learn about this, you realize that so many of those internal skills overlap. And it's the same with the external skills, like social skills and empathy. They're different, but they definitely overlap as well. So there are loads of training, loads of books. Book studies are always good. Professional learning communities are always good to bring my book or other books like mine into it. And then there's the Ruler program, which is through Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. There's the CARE program, the Pro-Social Classroom. There's lots of programs out there, and the data is just overwhelming. I mean, I encourage anyone who's interested at all to just look up data on social emotional intelligence and education. You will be amazed at the difference in incorporating these practices into your program.
Yeah. You had mentioned your book. Will you share a little bit about that and how our educators will see a difference once they use this wonderful resource?
Well, hopefully, it depends on how it's used. I mean, hopefully it will be used at the district level or even the
Yeah.
local school level, but it can also be used individually. I'm a big believer in sort of taking charge of your own health, your own well-being. So you can use it in any of those ways, but it basically provides tools across those 5 domains that I just mentioned. And with each tool, it's 22 tools total. And then under each one is a technique, usually a series, 5 or 6 techniques that you can integrate, followed by a scenario so that you see how it's used in real world. And then there's also a chapter on how to integrate tools into your daily practice. And many of these tools honestly only take about 10 minutes out of your day. Because the one thing we know is we do not want to add work to educators at all. So we know that a lot of these tools can be like, oh, just one more thing. But it really isn't, because once you start to schedule it in, it just becomes part of what you do. And one of the chapters of my book is specifically on neuroplasticity, because that's a really important part of building these skills. Your brain will start to rewire in such a way that bringing yourself to a state of calm in the midst of a conflict becomes your default. That's what's amazing. The brain can change. So the brain changes. Instead of reacting with a stress response, now your immediate default is, I'm centered, I'm calm, I'm aware. I'm gonna respond and not react. I mean, that doesn't happen overnight, and you have to kind of use the tools consistently, but it does happen. And I saw it happen within myself because I've used these tools for years.
So the neuroplasticity piece, if that's a new
Yes.
term for folks, I know you touched on it a little bit, but will you expand on that specifically for our educators and our leaders? Because I think that that point is really important.
I can try. I don't know if I can,
I know it's
I
like,
don't know if
how
I
do I
can
say it in
explain it
layman's
quickly.
term? Yeah.
It's basically those neural networks in your brain.
Yeah.
Counter a stimulus, your brain will kind of automatically respond, right? And that is a neural network or a circuit in your brain that operates on a continual basis. And a lot of times for most of us, if you are in a stressful environment, right? And you're triggered a lot, you're always getting, you're stressed, you're frustrated. You're thinking, gosh, I just would like to be able to complete my work for the day, and I can't do that. Every day I'm coming in stressed, or however your environment is, those neural networks become quicker and stronger. So that every time you face a stimulus like that, that's your default: frustration, stress, those kinds of things. When you start to integrate EQ or emotional intelligence skills, what you do is you interrupt that pattern and you start to build different neural networks so that then a more helpful And a response that serves you better is the default. Does that make sense? Explaining
No, you did a
neuroplasticity
great
very
job.
well, but
No, you did a great job. And the
yeah.
reason I'm asking is because I think a lot of educators and especially leaders, like you were talking about, right? I mean, I can remember days where I would walk in and I already had a line of people
Yes.
outside my door and talking about stress.
Oh,
I was
yes.
thinking, oh my
Yes.
goodness, like my to-do list that's already very, very long is being usurped by the fact that I have, 10 people already standing with
Yes.
problems that I need to solve. And so, and then you topple that with like before students even arrive, I'm getting transportation calls and I'm getting radio, and I have parents showing up, fill in the blankets to the many fires, like you said, that are happening. And so now my brain, you say this happens every day.
Yes. Yes, it
now
does.
now I'm waking up and I'm already
With
having
that.
anxiety
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
things that I don't have control over, things that I know will probably happen. I don't know what they look like, but it's the unknown that's really, really heightening my senses and my stress and my anxiety and some of these other things. So I'm just thinking through all of the folks right now, especially in the spring, where we've got states testing and we've got things that are due from the district and from the states, and you have all these fires that are happening on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Maybe let's talk about some of the management of stress and what are some strategies that they can implement right away to kind of help so we don't have these strong emotions.
Well, and you were describing the perfect burnout scenario
Yeah.
with your description of the school day. Of course, if you don't sort of intervene, because your body, let's be honest, our body and our brains were developed to survive. So you're in survival mode, basically. You're triggering off the amygdala and all those areas of the brain that are trying to keep you alive and keep you surviving, and fear and frustration and all that is part of it. So when you actually use these tools, Josh, you're triggering, the neocortex, right? So you're getting outside of that primal brain and getting into your thinking brain. And that just makes all the difference because you think more clearly. 'Cause if you're reacting from a place of frustration, you're not thinking clearly. You're not supposed to. You're just supposed to survive. You're not supposed to be thinking clearly. Once you move away from that and into the thinking brain, now you can actually start to, okay, yeah, this is huge. This is a lot, but we're going to take it one task at a time. We're going to move through, that kind of thing. So strategies you can use right now, and people ask me that a lot. I think one of the main ones you can use right now is breath work. There's lots of different types of breath work, and the research is just overwhelming on the benefits of practicing it regularly. You just have to make sure you remember to practice it. So a lot of people will set timer on their phone, on their watch, and about every hour they'll engage in a breath work activity. And you can use belly breathing, four square breathing, alternate nostril breathing. There's lots of different research-based breathwork practices that take less than 5 minutes. And that is something that any educator can do like several times a day. And then another one is, this is just something that I do that helps me a lot, but starting and ending the day with a gratitude practice. Again, the research is massive on gratitude. It's a mind shift, isn't it? I mean, it brings you from negativity and frustration into a place of feeling really positive and actually seeing things a lot more clearly. So there's the gratitude jar. There's something I developed called, I don't know if I developed it, but it's called, I think I did. I think maybe I had something, I don't know. It's called gratitude activation. There's gratitude letter writing. There's just so many different things like that that are simple. You start your day with it, you end your day with it. You
Mm-hmm.
can write 3 good things at the end of the day. Lots of different ways that you can incorporate these kind of tools.
I'm gonna say you coined it. You're the inventor of it.
Oh,
I
are you
want to
going to
give
say
you props.
that? Well, gratitude activation is one that I love because I love music. So
Sure.
gratitude activation is what I do is I play a song that just uplifts me or motivates me. And yes, sometimes it can be strange because I get uplifted by rock and roll and things like that instead of instead
No,
of
totally.
me
There's
makes
studies
me
with
feel
that.
happy. Yep. So I listen to that and I let myself get into a state of gratitude. So I start thinking about all the things that I'm thankful for when I'm in that state and the music's playing, right? So
Yep.
thinking about all the things I'm thankful for and let it really get in there. I used to do that maybe 2 or 3 times, and then all I had to do was play the song, and I would immediately shift. Of course, it's classical. That's why I said I didn't invent it because I think it's classical conditioning or operant conditioning.
Sure.
I think it's operant conditioning. But you go right back to that place. So if you're stressed during the school day, pop in your earbuds, click on that song, And all of a sudden, your mind just shifts. You're not even thinking about it at that point because you've already paired it together. Yeah. So
I
you
use it
use
in
it
my
at school
keynotes
too.
too.
Oh, yeah?
So like in my keynotes, yeah, I play music, but I also have a graphic, after I play Bon Jovi, then I put up the graphic that says that it actually improves your happiness after you listen to this song. And I tell my folks that are there, you're welcome, because I just increased your happiness just with one
See?
song.
Is it living on a prayer?
It is.
How did I know? How did I know? It is a very happy, it's optimistic, right?
Yeah,
There you
but there is
go.
a lot of research too that goes in with music and the beats and all that kind of stuff too. So
Yes, absolutely.
we won't digress into that area and go down that rabbit hole. But I do want to transition over to something that you've created. You talked about things that you coined, your transformational tools for special education, which launched this past January. So
In
we just talk
January,
about,
yes.
that resource for folks.
Yes, absolutely. So as I was doing this research, given that I had so much experience with special education, I wrote the book for special education, but there's probably going to be a volume 2 for educators because like I said, when the more research I did, I thought, wow, this is not just special education, it's the whole field. So it launched in January, and then there's been a demand for a workbook to go with it. So the workbook itself is for all educators. It's not just, for special educators. You don't have to own the book to use the workbook. And there's plenty of information. We just talked about some tools. There's plenty of information on the tools for the workbook to stand alone. So for people who don't want to go through an entire book and want to just get in there and get hands-on, that's a really good option.
And then curriculum.
Oh,
Is
yeah,
that also
that's
coming out?
right. It's actually finished. So I have a
Oh,
curriculum that
perfect.
that is ready for a professional development sequence, and that is something I'm very, very excited about. I'm talking to some people. I think people have to get past the idea that this kind of development is sort of self-help fluff, if you know what I mean. They have to understand that the research out there is very, very clear that it's science-based, and if you want to keep those teachers and you want them to be happy in their work and you want them to thrive and excel, and I really think that every good leader wants that. And if that's what you want, then you have to ask the question, well, what am I doing about the high burnout rates? And what does the research say would help that? And that's where this kind of development comes in. So,
Yeah, we have to push back on that stigma too. I had a buddy
yeah,
that
yeah,
was on the podcast that said mental health is professional development, and if we have that as our mind frame,
yes,
then I think it makes a lot of sense to talk about these strategies and have time built into. I think that's the other thing is we talk
yes,
about mental
absolutely.
health and then we don't allow anyone to do anything in regards to the strategies that are talked about. So making sure that
Agree.
there's room and space for, in addition to not only talking about it.
And I think it's happening. I think that what's happening now is people are becoming much, much more aware and much more open to it. So I do think that this kind of work is going to become the norm in the future. Um, because you just can't keep ignoring what the data says. You have to say, okay, if I want to keep people happy and I want to, because when our staff is happy, our kids are happy. I mean, this when you develop this kind of emotional intelligence, it affects your classroom too. We have data that shows improved student outcomes, classroom management improves. All of those things get better. So I see that as really becoming more of the norm, hopefully in the not too distant future.
Oh my gosh, yeah. There's definitely a
Yeah.
correlation. So, all right, let's dive into a question I like to ask all of my guests. So, for those who are listening, aspiring leaders or current leaders, if there's something they can do tomorrow or next week to enhance their leadership journey, what would you recommend?
I would recommend exploring emotional intelligence. I would recommend doing a deep dive into what
Yep.
it is, what it can do. You can do that through my book because it also gets into neuroplasticity. It also gets into how emotional intelligence developed, how it moved over time. But there's so much information. I mean, I would just do a deep dive into emotional intelligence and look at what it can do. And then try some of the techniques yourself. Give it a try. Any of them that resonate with you. There's loads of techniques. I love cognitive reframing. That's one of the motivation techniques, self-efficacy. There's so many different ways that you can build your emotional intelligence. So that would be my main suggestion. Just get into it. See what you can learn about it.
Yep. I love it. Just consider some changes, consider some
Yeah.
research. All right. So I've been flashing your website during our conversation for those who are watching on YouTube, but for our folks that are, consuming this conversation on podcast platforms, how can people get a hold of you, reach out if they have any questions, or just follow you on social media to, learn about more things that you're doing throughout the next year?
Yeah, well, I welcome you to my website. It's huelsappliedharmony.com. Find me on Twitter at cat_Huels. And then I'm on LinkedIn as well. So just look for my name on LinkedIn. I should pop up. For some reason, there aren't a lot of Katrina Huels in the world, so I come up pretty quick.
That's nice. And Cat's with a K, right?
Cat is with a K, yes.
Cat with a K. All right. So I will make it as easy as possible for folks. So I will make sure that on all platforms in the show notes, we'll have the links for Katrina. So that way you can just click on it, make sure that you're heading over to her website, seeing all the services that she provides. Definitely check out her awesome book. I've been flashing up that title as we've been talking also. So make sure that you find that resource. And it says special education, but like you said, it's really for any educator.
Everyone. And the workbook is definitely geared toward regular educators, just and leaders too. That's really important too. Leaders need this too.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's such an important topic. So I'm so glad that you're on here to talk about some strategies, uncovering some of these really important terms that sometimes we hear, but we don't understand the definitions to, but then also, how folks can really dive into this work even further to help themselves and be the best version for the students. So with that, Katrina, thank you so much for being on Aspire to Lead.
And thank you so much, Josh. I appreciate you.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.